Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Jennifer Summers and I am the Program Development Specialist with the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife, and I helped co-organize this seminar series. This is the Living with Wildlife seminar series. Today we are featuring Brilyn Brecka, and she will be talking about grassland management and student success. So I just wanted to go through a couple of thank yous and acknowledgements and kind of talk about this series before we get to our talk. So again, I'd like to acknowledge the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife for assisting in planning this seminar series, but this series is part of the Wildlife 150 course. This is a course that is dedicated to teaching students about human-wildlife interactions, and this is a course that is open to all students, all UWSP students, regardless of major. So this is so these seminar series are part of this class, and so but they're open to the public and they're open to anybody who is interested in learning more about wildlife. So anytime the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point has a public gathering, including virtual gatherings, we like to take a moment to go through this acknowledgement. We recognize the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point occupies lands of the Ho-Chunk and Menominee people. Please take a moment to acknowledge and honor the ancestral Ho-Chunk and Menominee land and the sacred land of all Indigenous peoples. And so with that, I would like to note that this is the third presentation in our seminar series. The other talks are available online on our website if you'd like to see the recordings. Not next week, but a few weeks from now, we have on April 27th, which is also a Tuesday, Adrian Weideven, who is the Timber Wolf Alliance coordinator at Northland College. He is going to be talking about wolves in Wisconsin. And so in the transition from being an endangered species to a hunted game species. So please check that out on April 27th. You can get more information at our website, which is www.uwsp.edu/WCW. Thank you. Katie will now introduce our speaker and talk a little bit about, if you wanted to mention the course and welcome your students, but thank you very much.
Yeah, hi, thanks Jennifer. So my name is Katie Sartini. I am one of the two professors along with Scott Hangstrom who teaches the Living with Wildlife class. And this seminar has just been such a fun way for us to be able to bring in speakers from different parts of the country. And actually the fun part about today is that Brilyn Brecka, our speaker today, is actually the TA for our class as well. And so it's my absolute pleasure to be able to introduce you to Brilyn. I guess those of you who are not in the class already and don't already know her as your TA. So Brilyn is currently a junior here at UW-Stevens Point, and she's majoring in wildlife ecology and management, of course, and minoring in biology. She grew up in Alma, Wisconsin, where she enjoyed spending time with her dad, hunting, fishing, hiking, and wildlife photography. She's also heavily involved in the UW-SP student chapter of the Wildlife Society as a past web designer, current treasurer, and most importantly for us today is a co-leader for the Adopt a Wildlife Area project, which she's going to be telling us a bit about in just a minute. She's also the undergraduate student representative for the North Central section of the Wildlife Society. In addition to all that, she is a student athlete. She's on the track and field team here, which is just loads of fun when we get to watch her do that. She has worked for several natural resources agencies in the past, including the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In conjunction with her experiences with those agencies, she's also an employee of the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife and has been one of my absolute favorite teaching assistants. So what I just wanted to say very, very quickly about Brilyn is that she just does a really good job at all the things that she does, and she loves sharing it with other people. And that's why she was just a really natural fit, I think, to include here in this seminar series. And in particular, what she's going to be talking about today fits in with our class very well because it has to do with habitat management, which is really the unit that we're kind of focusing on. So I'm really very happy to introduce you to Brilyn, who is theoretically here, and we'll turn her camera on. There she is.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Dr. Sartini. I'll get the slides pulled up. Look good on your end?
Mhm.
So thanks everybody for coming out today. I know the weather has been nice today, so it's great that you have taken the chance to get inside and sit on another Zoom call. But today we're going to be talking about some grassland habitat management and student success management at the Buena Vista Wildlife Area. I see a lot of familiar names in the participant list. I noticed Lisa Kardash from the Wisconsin DNR is also present today. So she's one of our main contacts with the DNR, so it's great to see her here. So the picture on the left side of the screen shows me holding a chainsaw on one of my first outings with the AWA project in 2018 when I was a freshman. The high for that day was 90 degrees, but the satisfaction of taking off hot chainsaw chaps after a long day of work was well worth the sweat. Less than a month after that outing, I became a co-leader for the project, and the picture on the right shows me explaining how to properly fell a tree to one of our volunteers during our latest outing that happened last month. And the experience going from volunteer to co-leader has allowed me to develop a wide variety of skills while working to protect and conserve grassland habitat in central Wisconsin. So today I'll kind of go over the importance of grassland habitats and some of the threats that these areas are facing. And then we'll go through some of the history of the Buena Vista Wildlife Area, as well as the management techniques that are utilized on this area. And then I'll go over the UW-Stevens Point student chapter of the Wildlife Society's Adopt a Wildlife Area project, and kind of summarize how that project fits in with the management goals of the Buena Vista Wildlife Area. So starting with the importance and threats of grasslands. Grasslands are carbon sinks, and that means that they contain a lot of the world's carbon. In fact, worldwide, they contain over 50% of the world's organic carbon, and the amount of carbon in the soil and grasslands helps offset the carbon dioxide rise in the atmosphere. A 2018 study from UC Davis found that grasslands are more resilient carbon sinks than forests are in California, and in the right circumstances, grasslands could reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by the year 2030. Grasslands are also great habitats for grassland-dependent species. Many animals depend on them for survival and reproduction and use them as food sources and refuges for animals such as the greater prairie chicken, which is a species of concern in Wisconsin, and it's also a focal species in the grasslands in central Wisconsin. And these grasslands also provide a wide variety of outdoor recreational opportunities for the public to enjoy. These outdoor activities include hunting for big game, small game, upland game birds, trapping for fur bearers, fishing, birding, wildlife viewing, hiking, and gathering wild edibles. These activities could also provide economic value for the tourism that is generated in these areas. So while these grasslands are so important for reducing CO2 levels or just being great areas for the public to enjoy the outdoors, there are many threats that these areas are facing. The soils in these areas are extremely fertile, making them ideal for the conversion to ag lands. And this can remove crucial habitat that is needed for some of those grassland-dependent species. As we'll see when we go through the history of the Buena Vista Wildlife Area, agriculture was a prominent activity that happened on the property. And there's also the encroachment of invasive species and animals and plants, and that's especially due to the removal of fire on the landscape. And that allowed a lot of invasive plants to take advantage of this resource-rich habitat. So also neglecting the management of land can lead to the encroachment of these woody invasive species and create more of a wooded area, which is definitely not ideal for animals that prefer and thrive on wide open spaces. So one of these important grasslands is the Buena Vista Wildlife Area, home to the largest concentration of greater prairie chickens in the state. The Buena Vista Wildlife Area is the most extensive grassland east of the Mississippi River. The property lies 20 miles south of Stevens Point, and many techniques are utilized to optimize the habitat in the area. Historically, this was a marsh dominated by tamarack, black spruce, and cattails. However, it was drained for agricultural purposes in the early 1900s. The 13,500 acre property is owned by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, the Dane County Conservation League, and the Wisconsin Society for Ornithology. The property is also classified as a central Wisconsin grassland area, conservation area, and an important bird area. Many plants and animals call Buena Vista home. Some of the cool season grasses we see on the property are brome, timothy, and orchard grass, and some of the warm season grasses include little bluestem and big bluestem. In addition to some of the grasses we see, there's also a wide variety of cool forbs, and these include spiderwort, lupin, prairie smoke, self-heal, prairie blazing star, several aster species, and goldenrod. And because of the plants that are present on in this area, there are tons of different wildlife that call the area home. Many of these species are species of special concern, and some are just common overall. Some of these are bobolink, eastern meadowlark, grasshopper sparrow, Karner blue butterfly, greater prairie chicken, northern harrier, short-eared owl, Blanding's turtle, gray wolf, coyote, red fox, and white-tailed deer. And there are plenty more animals and plants that I did not mention. So the overall management goal of the property is to protect and enhance large open grassland habitat with different vegetation heights and densities to meet seasonal habitat needs of numerous grassland dependent species. I want you to keep this management goal in mind as we continue on with the presentation. In order to accomplish this management goal, a variety of management techniques are used either by themselves or in combination. So there's both herbaceous mowing and brush mowing, herbicide application, rotational and continuous grazing, sharecropping and hay agreements, and prescribed burning. So we'll go through some of the mowing activities that happen on the property. Your herbaceous mowing is going to occur in the summer and fall from July to November, and your brush mowing is going to happen in the summer throughout the winter from July to March. And the difference between the two is basically that the herbaceous mowing is getting at your grasses and forbs that we're targeting, while your brush mowing is targeting some of those woody invasive species. This is performed primarily using tractors with mowing attachments, and this mowing can remove or beat back any of those woody or herbaceous invasive species. Overall, it can promote biodiversity and discourage large monocultures of a single plant in these areas. Herbicide application is commonly used in conjunction to complement the cutting of plants that sprout back quickly. However, it can also be applied directly to the plants themselves. Herbicide will usually disrupt the essential functions of the plants and cause them to die back. You can apply different herbicides to different plants in order to meet your objectives for management, and sometimes using different herbicides will kill one plant but leave your more desired species alone. This herbicide spraying happens in the summer and fall from May to September, and it can be applied to cut stumps as well as just being sprayed directly onto the plants, as I mentioned before. But when we're trying to target some of these invasive species, we're trying to spray spotted knapweed, butter and eggs, Canada thistle, common St. John's wort, orange hawkweed, quackgrass, reed canary grass, and smooth brome. Sharecropping and grazing both occur in the summer months from May to November. And these two methods are mutually beneficial for both the Wisconsin DNR and farmers. Farmers are able to feed their cows using sustainable food from pastures on the property by either bringing their cows directly there or haying fields and bringing the food back to their cows. And then the DNR gets to use these cows as a management tool. So the grazing is used to control invasive species and plants and also promotes biodiversity. As you can see, I took that top photo at a prairie walk in October of last year. So it was really interesting to watch the farmer move his cows and just to see the differences between grazed areas and ungrazed areas. And this is just a really cool tool that the DNR has been using to promote some biodiversity by using natural methods like cows. And then one of the more exciting management techniques is prescribed burning. The suppression of fire has had a great impact on the environment, especially for areas that need fire in order to thrive. When fire burns on grasslands, the carbon that's fixed underground in the soil and in the roots stays in the soil and the roots, and that makes these plants more adapted to survive and grow back more quickly after a fire has gone over the area. Trees and other plants not adapted to fire cannot grow back very quickly, even if they survive a fire that passes by. As a result, this fire helps grasslands it keeps them from becoming woody and without trees and brush, and stops them from becoming a forest, which is very important for grassland dependent species that need these wide open areas. Burning happens in March and April, which is right now. You probably heard a lot about fires on the news from the DNR. They're definitely doing a lot of burning at the Buena Vista Wildlife Area at the moment. And this just in general can help promote the growth of grasses and forbs and keep woody encroachment at bay. So while the property is managed by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, the area was adopted by the UW-Stevens Point student chapter of the Wildlife Society. And we call ourselves the Adopt a Wildlife Area Project, affectionately known as the AWA Project. And that is a student-led experiential project focusing on giving undergraduate students hands-on opportunities to work in these cool ecosystems while assisting the DNR with habitat management techniques on the grasslands. The Adopt a Wildlife Area was established in October of 2017, and the first 3-year contract saw 74 volunteers for 1,111 volunteer hours. We renewed the contract in October of 2020, and since then we've had 18 volunteers and 112 volunteer hours logged from November 2020 to March 2021. The purpose of this project is to help accomplish land management work in conjunction with the Wisconsin DNR and to foster local community engagement in these public lands. On the student end of this project, we are focusing on developing key career skills and understanding of habitat management practices, as well as networking with wildlife professionals in these areas. So right now I'll go into some of the project specifics. Under our contract with the DNR, students must annually contribute a minimum of 3 workdays and 100 hours of labor. The AWA project has absolutely no problems meeting that requirement. As you could probably tell from the last slide, in our first 3-year contract, we had over 1,000 hours, and this year alone, we've already met the minimum requirements. So it's definitely not a difficult thing to get students to volunteer for us. Our students also meet a lot of the DNR training standards, and that includes anything from using chainsaws. Our students are certified with the exact same chainsaw certification that DNR staff are required to take, and there's several forms that volunteers fill out in order to meet these training standards. We have equipment that is dedicated to the project, and that is kept at the Buena Vista field office. We've got chainsaws, brush saws, safety equipment, gas, oil, herbicide, things like that, and that's all stored there for us for when we go on our work days. Typically, if we're looking for, if we want to go out on a volunteer outing, like I said, we're student-led, so we have several co-leaders. We've got 6 right now, and they're responsible for organizing work days, organizing the volunteers, leading volunteers when we get out there. And usually if we're going to go out on a work day, we will push out a call for volunteers at our TWS weekly meetings. And the picture right there is an example of a slide that I would present at one of those meetings. And one thing I want to highlight on the slide is that we emphasize that absolutely no experience is needed in order to volunteer for us. So we train all of our volunteers in the field, whether it's how to run a brush saw, how to use the herbicide, how to do these different management practices. And I think that's a really crucial thing for our project, because we get a lot of freshmen or people who aren't very familiar with the techniques that we're using. So it's definitely a great experience for people who are new to the wildlife field to just get their feet wet and just get a baseline understanding of what the field work is like in natural resources. So when we decide we want to go on a work day, we email the property managers. I send an email to Lisa Kardash and Zach Knabb from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, and they send me the project information, maps, where we need to go and what we need to do, as well as any other specific things that they want us to do while we're out there. And these work days occur on the weekends. So a lot of students are sacrificing their Saturdays or Sundays for a couple hours or several hours to come out and work with us. And if that doesn't scream dedication, I don't know what does. So now I'll kind of go through some of the specific projects that we work on. A lot of what we do is brush cutting, primarily operating chainsaws and brush saws. And we'll receive our project sites from Zach, and he'll outline what needs to be cut and if we should pile it and stuff like that. And so we have our certified volunteers running chainsaws. People who aren't necessarily certified in chainsaws can run the brush saws. And then we've got the other volunteers doing some piling of the plants that we cut. And that's the idea behind that is to get it into a centralized spot so that can be burned in the following spring or whenever they want to do that. A lot of the main plants that we're cutting down include pine, cherry, spirea species, willow species, honeysuckle, and aspen. And again, that's just trying to get these invasive woody species off of the grassland, because that's not what's supposed to be there. That's not what's going to promote the best habitat for these grassland dependent species. And so here we have an example from one of our work days. As you can see, it only took a couple hours and a couple of chainsaws to remove all of the willow around this pond in preparation for rotational grazing and burning in the spring. Another major project we're involved in is the Snapshot Wisconsin project, and we started that in the spring of 2019 in collaboration with Emily Donovan from Snapshot Wisconsin. And what our volunteers do is they assist in the deployment of trail cameras on greater prairie chicken leks. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, a lek is a wide open area where prairie chickens congregate in order to perform their breeding displays. And the males really like hanging out in these areas because they can show their stuff and display their big, bright orange air sacs so those females can see them. And we've definitely had a lot of success seeing prairie chickens, and we'll see some pictures here soon. Primarily, what another component for volunteers is replacing the SD cards and the batteries, and then classifying the photos that get uploaded to the Snapshot Wisconsin website. Last week, we actually deployed cameras on 5 different leks. So we will be going out and checking those SD cards and changing batteries within the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then classifying photos as the spring semester continues. And here are some cool pictures that I thought were really cool from our 2019 season. As you can see, prairie chickens are not the only animals that we catch on these cameras. There's tons of deer that walk by, coyotes. We've got one here, and you can just see the other's ear. Here's a kind of a tough one. You can see the meadowlark is camouflaged there. So I thought that was a pretty cool picture. He was just hanging out. And then there's our big, beautiful male prairie chicken strutting his stuff in the snow and sleet and freezing temperatures. As you can see, that did not bother him, and he had other things on his mind. I thought these pictures were kind of funny of prairie chickens flying in and out of the leks. Here we've got a hen enjoying the warm mid-morning sun, soaking that in. And then I believe this was confirmed as a wolf walking through, and Lisa could correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe there's 2 wolf packs that call Buena Vista home. So in addition to that project, the student chapter of the Wildlife Society has recently been creating educational videos to kind of offset some of the difficulties and limitations that we've run into related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Adopt Wildlife Area was featured in our new series of educational videos called Project Wildlife. And right now, I'll run through this video, and it'll actually kind of show you what a typical workday looks like for us. So when we go out on work days, we'll usually meet at a parking lot at Stevens Point and convoy out to the Buena Vista Wildlife Area field office. When we get there, we'll do some introductions, decide what the plan is for the day, make sure everyone knows the safety precautions and how to use equipment, and we'll be taking all of this equipment out of our shed there and loading it into the vehicles so we can drive out to our work sites. once we get out to the work sites, we'll usually do another debriefing, trying to make sure everyone knows the plan for the day. I'll show everybody the map, make sure everyone knows what we're cutting and why. And that why component is really important, so the students can learn not only how to do the management techniques, but also why we're doing the management techniques. So once everyone's ready, we'll get our equipment unpacked and decide who gets to use what for the day. Usually we switch off who's using what so everyone can get the most experience needed. But recently with COVID restrictions, we've been limiting everyone to just having their own piece of equipment to reduce any sharing of equipment. After we're cutting, after we've got most of some trees cut down, we'll usually walk our brush to a pile so we can, those can get burned later. And there we usually do some herbicide application to reduce any regrowth of species that are pretty quick to come back, and this just helps reduce that regrowth. If we've got any thicker trees or branches or stumps, we get the big farm boss chainsaw out and get those removed as close to the ground as possible. Everyone has a different job to do, and many hands make quick work. As you can see, not a lot of standing around, whether you're cutting or you're piling some brush, there's always something to do. If we're there for a long period or throughout the afternoon, we'll take a quick lunch, but then back to work after that. Brush piles get pretty big. I think it takes some skill to get that big, to get those trees up on top. So it's definitely a big effort for our volunteers, and definitely appreciate that. And that's my favorite part, is that you can see a difference on the landscape. You know, you get there at the beginning of the day and you see all these trees and the brush that's in these areas. And then after a few hours, you look back and you see nothing. You see a pile of trees at the end of the day and open grassland. And I think that's the coolest part of this project, is just seeing that you can make a difference on the land, and collaboratively making that difference, with whether it's between volunteers or between agencies, with in conjunction with like the student chapter working and the Wisconsin DNR. Once we're done with our site or we're done with the workday, we'll pack up all of our equipment and load it into the vehicles. Once we get everything packed up, we'll bring everything back to the shed and unload and call her a day. And that is what a successful workday looks like at the Buena Vista Wildlife Area. So now that you know what a workday looks like at the Buena Vista Wildlife Area, I kind of wanted to share this quick little story about one of our workdays in 2019, I think. So we were out cutting some brush and willow around this pond. It was a nice day, kind of chilly, but definitely not the worst day we've been out. And as you can see, some people had to get wet. I believe that's McKenna Hammonds. Definitely not the most fun working conditions, but you know, we saw some cool things. There were these cute little frogs everywhere. I think we saw some type of rail swimming around. Unfortunately, we had to shoo him out, and so we could cut those trees down. But being one of the only people with rubber boots, I was sent into the pond to finish cutting some bigger trees. But nonetheless, the rubber boots didn't really help. So here's a quick video of the result of getting in that pond. Oh. So it was a wet day, but did not dampen any spirits. One statistic I would like to share is this one. We've had 90 volunteers for over 1,200 field hours, and we've had, to my knowledge, 0 accidents. And I think this says a lot about the leadership that's on this project, the training that we receive, and our volunteers. When we start a workday, I make sure that everybody knows that safety is our #1 priority. We stand in a circle, we talk about what tools we're going to be using, how those tools can be dangerous. We talk about the circle of death. We talk about how you're responsible for your safety, but also the safety of your peers. And it's just one of the most important things, especially being students out here working on state properties. We take a lot of pride in being safe and providing a safe environment for our students to gain experience. And the training we receive is also top-notch, whether that's through chainsaw safety specialists in getting certified for running chainsaws because they're very dangerous, or whether that's training that the DNR has provided from Lisa or Zach on like how to work a workday and how to just be safe and smart in the field. And then I think it also says a lot about our Stevens Point TWS members. I think our members are very conscious about how we're perceived by the public, and we definitely take a lot of pride in being safe while trying to manage these habitats or do other jobs in the natural resource field in a safe, effective way. So I thought this was just a really cool statistic that definitely needs to be addressed in this presentation. So going back to some of our partnerships, in 2019, our project was recognized by those involved in the National Prairie Chicken Shooting Dog Championships. So each year, trainers and dogs from all over the country flock to Buena Vista to participate in the championships. And in 2019, several of our co-leaders, volunteers, our advisor, Dr. Riddle, and DNR staff were invited to come spend some time out on the grassland with the dogs, the trainers, the horses, and the prairie chickens. So in recognition for professionalism, academic achievement, and commitment to the Adopt a Wildlife Area project, Ed Lyerman and the dog trial folks graciously provided several scholarships to those who have volunteered with the project. I was the recipient of the 2019 scholarship as well as the 2020 scholarship, and Jeffrey Edwards, who is one of our co-leaders, was also a recipient of the 2020 scholarship. We didn't get to meet up on the Grasslands this past year because of COVID, but we're definitely looking forward to continuing the scholarship and continuing the connections with the dog trial championships in the future. So while managing habitat at Buena Vista, we're also managing student success. There are many benefits that both co-leaders and volunteers gain while volunteering with us. There's also many certifications that our students can get. And this is important because a lot of the certifications are more difficult to obtain without sponsorship by the Wisconsin DNR and the Adopt a Wildlife Area project. The skills gained through AWA also directly transfer to many wildlife management jobs, and this just makes UW-Stevens Point Wildlife Society members more marketable for summer and seasonal employment as well as full-time positions. So students that are co-leaders or volunteers with us get to learn a lot of hard skills such as equipment maintenance and use, how to run a chainsaw, how to clean a chainsaw, stuff like that. And then these skills range from anywhere from that equipment use to research and survey skills. Our co-leaders learn a lot of soft skills that include leadership and communication and organization, and our volunteers kind of get the sense of what it's like to work hard and being professionals out in the wildlife field. And then there's several certifications that are offered through the Wildlife Society and the Adopt a Wildlife Area project. The Wildlife Society provides CPR and first aid training. The Wisconsin DNR and Adopt a Wildlife Area project sponsor chainsaw safety certifications, and we've been working with the DNR to certify people for carnivore tracking, and then also trying to get people licensed for commercial pesticide application. So one of our bigger certifications that we focus on is our chainsaw certification through Chainsaw Safety Specialists. And this certification is sponsored through the Wisconsin DNR, and it allows students to receive that safety certification in collaboration with Lee Shaman from the Chainsaw Safety Specialists. This is an all-day certification that takes place on campus at UW-Stevens Point and in the field. With more students certified to safely run saws, we can improve more habitat and provide more opportunities for students to gain experience in wildlife. And this is also a FISTA certification, so it is extremely transferable between state agencies and federal agencies and just makes our students more marketable in the future. So while we've done a lot for the AWA project, our different field projects or our Snapshot already, we are definitely not done. As I mentioned before, we've got our Snapshot Wisconsin project going for this year. We'll be classifying photos in the spring. So that's a great way for students to get involved on more of a technical side versus a field component. We're also planning on creating and developing a research component, looking at some quantitative measures of some habitat techniques that are being done on the property. So that proposal is being written up as we speak. And then, of course, we're going to continue our research management and our habitat management, and just keep plugging away and helping the DNR with the specific projects that they need to get done, because they can't do it by themselves. So we're definitely more than willing to continue helping with them. Overall, we've talked about the importance of grasslands and some of the threats that grasslands are facing. We've talked about the specific habitat management techniques at Buena Vista and why those techniques are so important to the area. And then I hope you now have a greater understanding of how the Adopt a Wildlife Area project fits into the management goals of the Buena Vista Wildlife Area, and how our students and our volunteers can be so successful when they get experiences in habitat management throughout their time on the Adopt a Wildlife Area project. So with that, I'd like to acknowledge some folks that helped with the project or this presentation. First and foremost, the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife, Scott Hingstrom. Thanks to him for inviting me to speak for this seminar series. I can't thank the folks at the Wisconsin DNR enough for helping develop this project and helping us become better land managers. Specifically, Lisa Kardash, Zach Nab, and Emily Donovan have been especially helpful in this process. Of course, we are a project run through the UW student chapter of the Wildlife Society, and so it's definitely helpful to have them as kind of a sponsor for the project. I'd like to thank some of the past co-leaders and the current co-leaders who are listed on the screen. We can't do a lot of this stuff without our volunteers, so thanks to them for all the hard work and hours that they put in on the property. I'd like to thank Lee Shimon from the Chainsaw Safety Specialist for providing instruction for our certification for work days. I'd like to thank Ed Leierman from the National Prairie Chicken Shooting Dog Championships and all of those people for providing scholarships for our volunteers. And then lastly, I'd like to thank Dr. Jason Riddle, who is our faculty advisor, and he's just a great head to have in this project, and he definitely helps a lot with questions or research that we're going to be doing. So thank you to all of the people mentioned above and everyone involved in the project. And I believe we should have some time for questions. And if you need to reach me at a later date, my email is on the screen. Thank you.
All right, Brilyn, great job. Yeah, this would normally be where we are, applauding, right? So thanks. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I really, this is a story that I love to hear. I love how active it is. I love how much work you put into sharing experiences and making sure that other students really get to do the work that you enjoy. And so that's always just fun for me to see. So what we're asking people to do here, we've got about 10 minutes for questions. So we're asking you to just chat in your questions if you have any. And since there's none from anyone else, I might start you off with a harder one. Actually, that would be a good question that I could ask any of our students. So students in the class, maybe you can be thinking about this as well. So Brilyn, at the beginning, you talked about the mission of management at Buena Vista. I think it was specific to that property, but you made that basically makes a point about protecting and enhancing habitat. So what do you see as the difference between protecting and enhancing habitat when we're talking about grasslands?
Yeah, so I think protecting would be, let's not change land use for it. Let's keep it as a grassland and not convert it to an ag field, or let's not build a house there, or, just trying to keep it as a grassland, what it's meant to be. And then I think enhancing would be more of let's do some management, let's change some stuff up, let's use the management techniques that we talked about to not only keep it as a grassland, but make it a better grassland. And using those techniques to promote more diversity, because one of the problems on the property, I guess, would be large stands of goldenrod, for example. And while you might call that a grassland, it's not necessarily the best grassland it can be. So let's do some management to it and maybe promote some diversity of different grasses and forbs. So it's not just one stand of goldenrod, it's more diverse.
Okay, so maybe maybe some of the work that you're doing is protecting, like if you're talking about removing trees, that's not a land use change, that's a habitat change. That would be converting a grassland to a different habitat type, right? So you're doing a little bit of both then, protecting and enhancing. Okay, good deal. Good job. All right, so Jill has a question for you as well about drainage ditches. So is there any work being done to keep those drainage ditches open?
Not to my knowledge by the AWA project, at least. If Lisa has any information on that, she can chat it in, but not on the student chapters end of things. I'm not sure what the DNR is doing for that.
Okay, so you're mainly working just with the grasslands themselves, and you're not really doing anything with those ditches.
No, not at the moment.
Okay.
So Lisa,
okay, so
yeah.
Go
so
ahead.
Lisa, we did do some brush cutting along these drainage ditches. So if that's what was meant by the question, then yes, we do try to keep those areas open and free from invasive woody species.
I'm curious, Brilyn, on a personal level, what this project has meant for you as a student, because you have kind of a different background than a lot of students. You know, I think from talking with you, it seemed like you had a pretty good idea of what you might want to do. So what do you think that this project has meant for you? And then what do you think that this project has meant for your peers as you watch people volunteer and see the things that they've learned?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I got involved with habitat management pretty early on, volunteering for the DNR in high school with my local DNR. And so it was kind of a natural fit to just slide into the project. I had already had my chainsaw certification, and it's just being involved in the project has just like solidified what I kind of want to get into, and just give me more experience on not just the field components, but also the organization of volunteers or organizing a workday and just managing the different aspects of field work, not just the field work itself. And then I think for volunteers who aren't as experienced, they come in and they don't really know what they're doing. So I think our project is a way, like I said, a way for them to get their feet wet in field work. So maybe they do it and they love doing it and they come out and volunteer with us for the rest of the semester. And then they get a job the next summer doing some of this field work for a state agency or a federal agency. Or maybe some people do it and they realize they don't like field work. Maybe they like the research side of wildlife, and that's where they want to be instead of being out in the field and doing habitat stuff. So I think it's an important project, especially because also this is the only habitat-based project through the Wildlife Society. So the rest are more animal-based, doing research on a specific species, while our project is focused on the habitat management for multiple species. So it's unique in that way, and I think it offers students a new perspective as they get more involved.
Yeah, good. I like that you brought up that for you, this is not just about the work that you're doing in the field, but it's also about the organizing and the other things. So that's a lot of other skills that you're getting because it's a student-led project, right, primarily. So I think that's pretty neat. So Jennifer has a question for you about herbicides. So she's asking, when you're using herbicides, are they applied to individual targeted plants or broadcasts or both? And how do they impact native plants?
So usually when the AWA project uses herbicide. It's mainly for treating cut stumps. Like we saw in the video, she was applying the herbicide directly to just the stumps in general and trying to avoid some of the other plants in the surrounding areas. But when maybe Zach Knabb is out there doing the more intensive herbicide use, he's probably using a more broadcast method, and I think it's, like I mentioned before, there's some herbicides that will affect just a certain type of plant and leave your more desired plants alone. So when you're using herbicides, I think you're right in all of your suggestions, Jennifer, that you can do individual targeted plants or just do a broadcast spray, and they can affect native plants, but you can adjust like your concentrations or what type of herbicide you're using in order to target what you want to target.
Okay, so a little bit of both. Mainly you're doing individual applications, but
Yeah.
it depends on what your objectives are.
Yeah.
Okay. Lisa has another question for you as well. So have you had the opportunity to communicate with members of the public while you're out working at Buena Vista? Do you get stopped and people chat with you about what you're doing?
We get a lot of slow drivers. A lot of people like to slow down and kind of peer out their windows and look at us. But we haven't had, at least I haven't really interacted with a lot of people. We do have laminated pieces of paper that we put in our cars that say we're part of the Adopt Wildlife Area project. We're supposed to be here. And so that's there in case we are away from our cars. But if anybody did stop and want to chat about it, I would definitely enjoy that experience, just to try and maybe inform the public of people who live there who don't really know what we're doing or how our work can affect the habitat and the places that they love to be.
Good. That's a good answer. So Lisa says that AWA students have been asked to utilize handheld sprayers to target individual species. Yeah, that's basically what you said, Brilyn. So
Yeah. And then
a more specific application, yeah, for you. Good deal. Well, are there any other questions? And we're right at 5 o'clock, so I'm actually really impressed at your time management skills, Brilyn. I'm going to add that to like your list of things to compliment you on later. Very good job. All right, so I will say thank you very much for attending this evening. I'll stick around for a few minutes in case any students would like to chat. But otherwise, thank you very much, and we'll see you at our next seminar.
And thank you, Brilyn. Thank you so much for presenting.
Mm-hmm.